Financial leadership is changing. CFOs no longer record history. They make history. This podcast will help you become a better leader, strategic thinker, and digital visionary. Welcome to Secrets of Rockstar CFOs, the ultimate podcast for chief financial officers. Follow along as Jack McCullough engages in exciting chats with accomplished CFOs, learning how they overcame obstacles and positioned their companies for the future. Here's your host, Jack McCullough.
Welcome back, Rockstars. You're going to love this episode today. We have one of the most intriguing guests that we've had. Jennifer Langton is the former CFO of Atari and most recently joined the NFL's Senior Vice President of Player Health Innovation. She has led major transformations by leveraging technology and analytics to improve performance, safety, and growth across diverse industries. She's now advising organizations on driving growth and transformation through bold strategies, visionary planning, and the integration of cutting-edge technology to improve operations, safety, and competitiveness. Jennifer, welcome to the Secrets of Rockstar CFOs.
Thank you, Jack, and thank you for the warm introduction.
Yeah, great to have you here. And I am one of those people, I oversimplify. It's a family trait. But maybe you can fill in the blanks a little about what you've been working on since you moved on from the NFL.
Yeah, well, thank you. Just after 15 very meaningful and transformative years at the NFL, I would say personally and professionally, I have gone out on my own to both do speaking engagements to really impact others on how to embrace innovation, inspire change, but lead with purpose. I made a major career pivot from a CFO to an operational role. And I used my own leadership style and something that I call CTG, Connect, Trust, and Grow, to present myself with purpose. So it's embrace innovation, inspire change, but also how to lead with purpose. And I have the tricks that have worked for me, Jack, to share with others. In addition, it's consulting and or coaching individuals or organizations on really how to inspire for change. And in this world of digital distribution, but it seems like the world is now being digitized, there's a process. And we've always called it the engineering process, that there's a process for which you create a vision, but it's the quick wins on how to get there, how to build expert ecosystems, how to really use data for conviction, but then the quick wins. And that is what I love to do to impact individuals and companies.
Well, it's fantastic that you're able to do that for your career. And we'll get into your career journey and some of the early experiences that have shaped you to that. But I just wanted, for my listeners, because I hadn't heard of it before, but what does NFL stand for? It's not really well known in the United States.
Oh, it sure is. National Football League. Yeah. And it's a global brand now.
Yeah, it's, when you think of the best brands in the world, there's Apple Computer, Disney, and maybe the NFL third, right? I mean, it's certainly right up there. You had quite a run there, and we'll absolutely explore that. But I want to chat a little about your early years before we get into that. Where'd you grow up?
I grew up on Long Island, New York, in a town called Port Washington.
Port Washington. I, of course, know Long Island, but so what was that like living there? Did you have a large family, brothers and sisters, or?
I'm the youngest of three. I had a very athletic family. I was, shall I say, athletically and academically gifted. So I was an active youth. And I think that my sports journey, as well as my academic journey, really accelerated my growth in understanding. And I can give you a funny story. My growth in understanding my skills and who I was, that I really had transformed the values playing sport in childhood into the blueprint for my career and the transformation that I've made for myself, but then for organizations. But Jack, everything goes back to the childhood roots for me personally, a very loving but athletic family.
That's great. We have a lot in common because you were good at sports and academics, and I always aspired to be good in sports and academics. But so right there, we have a common bond right there. But I think I probably oversimplified that you were good at sports and academics. But, the sports one, you were playing lacrosse against the boys as an early teenager, right?
I was at the age of 13, and the way that this story had come up, and I often share it in speaking engagements, but Jack, I was inducted about 2 years ago into the a Youth Hall of Fame on Long Island. And unbeknownst to that organization, I only played for 1 year in that organization. And the 1 year, so here I am inducted. And when I was writing my acceptance speech, the first thing is I just wanted my father to be there. Unfortunately, he's passed since, but I really wanted to thank him for the experience, for the story I'm going to share with you. But when I wrote out that acceptance speech, the memories were so vivid from that 1 year. And yes, it was playing on an all boys team. But what that 1 year taught me is how I break barriers. And many people ask, how did you survive in the male dominant world? Well, it was that experience that 1 year. And it was kind of uncanny how vivid the memories were, but now how I use that as sort of like a center focus for my story. But when I was 13 years old, my father was an athlete himself, Jack, and he was a big basketball player. But he was asked by that Youth Sports Association to help recruit and fill the team rosters. And lacrosse was a new sport. There was no lacrosse for women or girls at that time. And so he was standing in our kitchen in Port Washington, holding up an incomplete roster, making his case not to me, but to my mother, that they needed one more individual, right, to complete the team roster so that that team could play that year. It just so happened that that one player was my age, from my age group. And so my mother, of course, resisted immediately. She'll get hurt. But my dad really saw potential in me. And therefore, I start on an all boys team was the big catch. And understanding my skills, like if you could imagine, Jack, I was 13 years old. I played other sports and soccer, and I was a dominant athlete, right? So I was always succeeding in goals and presence. And I was always in the local paper and clips. But here I go out and I'm walking out on the boys' field. There is not one woman. There's not one stream of absolutely nothing. And I have to put on for the first time a bulky helmet and a shoulder pad. So I was more in fear that I was either going to get killed out there and hit, right? There was always that looming possibility of getting hit, but that they wouldn't accept me. But then yet, with every ground ball, because you're practicing nonstop before your first game, with every assist and every goal, it's like my confidence started to build. And then here was the big, really barrier change for me. It was our second game, and I would always point to where my father was on the sideline because he was like my anchor of support. And I got hit. I got flattened to the floor. And the ref comes running over and they do their safety checks, right? And so he does his safety check and he says to me, remove your jersey, remove your equipment. And I am like spinning, looking around, thinking like, oh my God, I'm the only girl. I am not doing that. And I brace myself and I scream so loud, I'm a girl. And so this one kid came up. I had just assisted him. Knows that I had just assisted him. And the memory is so clear. He said to me, oh my God, you were hit so hard. Are you okay? We need you back out there. And that is really where I was like, wow, it's okay to be a girl. This is not a gender thing. I made my stance. I didn't have to be like one of the boys. I didn't have to play, but I had a skill set that was unique within an environment for which I was very different, and that was gender. And so I really learned how to be authentic and how to connect with people. And if you don't connect on a team, you're not building trust and you're not going to have growth. And so what I had done that very next day is, you'll laugh, I had an Aunt Sally, and my Aunt Sally loved pink, but did not think girls should play sports. And I used to hear it all the time. And she called and she says to me, Jack, she was like, I heard that you got hit, hoping that I wasn't going to play. And I said, yeah, but I'm okay. But everybody really supported me and I feel more comfortable now. So I wore pink every time I got on the field to show.
Really?
Yeah, every time to show her. So whether it was like my blonde ponytail hanging out, but I wear pink because I was so proud of being authentic. Right. Yeah. And they then like the team, they really accepted me more because I was authentic and unique to myself. I wasn't trying to be like one of the boys. I was playing as me. And that really had changed really like me breaking barriers, but my own identity and understanding my skills and how to play those forward. And that certainly helped me in the many years ahead when even at the NFL, I was different when I took on health and safety. I was not a biomechanical engineer. I was not an epidemiologist. NFL hires and attracts the world's renowned specialist, and I had to run this innovation platform. It's okay to be different. Use your difference as strengths, and that's what I had done. So long way of saying that one example and that one experience of having to do an acceptance speech just opened so much up to me. Is like, wow, that's where it came from.
Well, it's interesting. You're probably familiar with the butterfly effect. It's familiar with that expression. You're getting hit at that lacrosse game probably had a butterfly effect impact on everything that, more than you could have imagined in the moment.
And then it was the support, though, that the team rallied around me. And maybe thank gosh, Jack, that I had just done that assist and the kid wanted me back. But it was a pretty unique experience. And I played through the rest of that entire year. I was nominated at the end, and then it took 2 years for girls lacrosse to come into existence. So I only played 1 year, and I went on to play girls lacrosse in junior high school. In college, I grew to a 4-time All-American, which was pretty unheard of. And then was recruited onto the national championship team at University of Virginia. So all that being said, is worth that experience, worth those breaking barriers. But I really, it transcended really the next decade of my life.
Yeah, no, I can imagine. And, it's remarkable. Jess and I joke about it, but every guest I've had on this thing, and, we had like 80, I think 77 of them were more accomplished athletes than I was. And I'm not exactly setting the bar high here, by the way, but I think there's something about exposure to sports and, although they're, maybe they're cliches, but I'm learning that they're cliches that are true about, helping you develop character, becoming a team player, becoming more resilient. I do think that those all probably translate to success in the corporate world.
My experience 100% did. And, the experience that I had just shared, and I know we'll get it more into my career, but, I really do. There's 2 elements of my life and experiences that I would compliment for my success. One of which is being an athlete. And the second is my finance experience and background. Just to understand, like, that was my health check. It was my, check of financials, like where we were growing, how we were growing, change your strategy. So that multidiscipline really taught me so much about the fine tuning of the build for operations and the execution of it with metrics, right? With confirming checks, the ROIs on things. And so those 2 things, more specifically for sports, like I was saying, you have to be authentic. And this is very much of my leadership style. If you can connect with individuals and they trust you, especially I've always done emerging technologies. And when you're doing an emerging technology, you're rolling out a new system, deploying it, many CFOs do. An individual is not going to trust the technology. They trust you first. And so that's similar to that boys team. They trusted me. They trusted when I was authentic, when I showed myself, not competing with them, not trying to be one. But that authentic connection is what builds and fosters trust on any team, whether that's a sports team or in the corporation. And when you can build that, then comes your growth, whether that's revenue, whether that's processes, whether that for me was, the health and safety of the world's most elite athletes at the NFL. No pressure, Jack, but, it is the same model. And for me, that connect, trust, grow is a very repeatable approach to my personal life, but then also to work. And the foundation of that is exactly what you're saying. For that, I think you said 80%. Sports and the discipline and the perseverance, it just, there's so much of the values associated with teamwork, being authentic, showing yourself your skills and understanding what your skills are not that play forward.
Okay, that takes it. Now, I want to explore your career path because it's fascinating, but Shannon told me to ask you about your first job. And is there a funny story there, or?
Well, she had asked, other than babysitting, my first real job that was on the payroll, Jack, was at a a marina on Long Island. It's in Sands Point, lovely boats, amazing environment. I didn't always have the opportunity to work because I was always on the road playing sport. And so my sister had worked at this marina called Capri Marina, and she is 5 years older than me. And one summer where I had a gap between summer camps, and sports, lacrosse camps, she asked me if I would woman, not man, the gas dock. And I was put on payroll. So what I would do is a big yacht would pull up and they'd hand me the ropes. You actually could tie, but the crew would jump off and tie. And because we're in such a litigious society, you couldn't actually pump the gas. All you could do is put the lever on and hand them the pump so that the crew pumped the gas.
Wow.
So my first job, when I was telling Shannon, I was like, wow, it's actually pretty unique and funny because I didn't do much, but the amount of money people spent to get a full tank of gas before they went out, and then the tip that I would get, that was an amazing first job. There's not much that I'd done, but be kind, be nice, be helpful. And because I was athletic, I could tie the ropes, but it was a lot less work than you would think for a very good sum of money at that age.
Yeah, I would imagine people that own yachts are probably pretty good tippers.
They are. Oh, yes. In relative to the amount of money that they were putting in their, in their yachts, it was fractional.
Cool. Well, I'm glad Shannon encouraged you to ask that one. But yeah, I want to talk a little about the career journey. And, you started out in finance, and finance skills tend to be transferable across most industries. But, the last three traditional jobs you worked before you started, what you're doing now is Viacom, Atari, and then the NFL. The common thread isn't super duper obvious. So I'm wondering how you approached your job in very different industries, particularly the role of the NFL was, just so different.
So it became so different, but the actual thread between those first jobs was very consistent. So I was hired to Viacom CBS for the 39 broadcasting stations, working in finance to do a financial implementation. And so I think everybody was in Excel hell for all the CFOs. And it's like, how do we best approach the consolidation so that the bosses, being my CFO and my CEO at that point, can be more real time and metrics based. So I had done an RFP. We had selected Microsoft at that point in time with their products, and we had done this consolidation, reducing the close time from weeks to days, Jack, across the 39 broadcasting stations. It caught Microsoft's attention, and they were rolling out, I'm going to date myself here, they were rolling out the first SharePoint portal, which is a website product. And so I was asked to pilot it with the executives. And here was a invaluable lesson, which played forward at the NFL, was when we were customizing the dashboards, I'd have to meet with the CFO and CEO. What metrics do you use? When we had this pretty bells and whistles in a dashboard, they would still calculate manually. So I'd have to go and sit with them. So I would actually compare and contrast daily for 2 weeks, their manual calculations to the system's results. They hadn't had consolidation systems at that point in time, nor did they have metrics that were then delivered for them. I'll never forget the day sales outstanding DSO calc. They still had to write it. But their trust came first in me and then the technology. Why? Because authentically, I understood what their concerns were. I understood what their needs were. I meet and do the test with them, right? And the due diligence to say, okay, this is exactly what you're calculating, but with this real-time nature of it, you could be doing, I couldn't say this at a young age, you could be doing A, B, and C, which is the actual management and execution, not sitting and writing. It was automation. And it was making it much more simple. The more insights that you have, the better you can manage the business, and then you can act. Play that forward. That's exactly what I had done later at the NFL, which we'll get. After Viacom, I was tapped by a former employee at Atari, that I started working with at Arthur Andersen, which was my first job out of college. And I did another financial implementation. He knew that I had done it at Viacom, but the gaming brand, being the iconic Atari, if you remember the 2600 console.
I do, yes.
They were having financial trouble. And so I did a financial implementation. And I built their first product P&L. What that product P&L and what the business was saying via the data was that we needed to restructure. And so here I was, a new gun there, doing this financial implementation similar to Viacom. And when we did the financial implementation, the difference here was I had to then consider my reputation as building as an executive, but put my reputation on the line to tell the board of directors this time we need to restructure. And so they never had a product P&L before. And so here it's still the financial implementation, but it's data and insights that you're now able to provide. I then was, right after that experience, I was named North American CFO at that time because I had done the entire restructure. We brought in a consulting firm. So at a young age, I was accelerating, but I was accelerating really because of the financial implementations and the knowledge I was gathering to then report out to the executives. The NFL then hired me to restructure their apparel strategy, just like I had done at Atari. Here, however, we were not in, financial concerns. It was a very different picture. And I had the likes of the heads of Nike, New Era, all of the brands that were pitching and presenting to me and the team there, the executives, to be on the field for licensing. So here was a really simple learnings that I translated, again, in finance. I entered the NFL as VP of Finance in business venture. So business venture, all the businesses that were venturing and really like growing into a new, let's just say like new streams of revenue. And international growth strategy was in there as well. So I came in and the NFL was going to send out an RFP book that was like this thick. And so for every product by every distribution channel, they'd have to fill it in. And I said, well, at Viacom, I built a website for the executives to manage their DSO. With that experience, what if we built a digital bidding platform? You'd have real-time bids and reporting. It's insights again. And that was such a game changer for them. She's innovative. I just think about different ways through those experiences to generate insights so that executives, and I was climbing up the ladder at that point, how executives could make quicker, more effective and efficient decisions. So I know it might not come across when you take a look at my profile, but very consistent, right, in the type of work that I was bringing on, more from a restructure, but with always emerging technology associated with it.
No, it's fascinating. And as you were sharing all of this, like, with Viacom in particular, there's technical challenge and there's financial challenges. But I actually think, when you're selling this, modernizing the reporting process or, opening up product lines, which is something that nobody had thought of before, it's really a leadership and a communications challenge more than anything else, right? And you were entrusted, particularly at Viacom, I'm not sure how old you were at the time, but you had sort of like changing the game at a relatively early point in your career, right?
Yeah. And I think that that's very much that skill set of mine, is being authentic and going in and asking the question. What if we, like I did at the NFL, was the same thing? It's like, we'll learn it together. I need the support to do A, B, and C. But with each success, then you leverage that success as a springboard. So starting at Viacom, when we had done the consolidation, it was like, wow, great. Our clothes changed. They approached me that I was working very well with the implementation and the success of it. Would you ask if we could pilot? So I was the one that had to go into the CFO and the CEO at that point in time and share with them the benefit that it would have for them. Now, here, it's never about you. If you can tie your purpose and your experiences to the operations or the executive's mission, that's a win-win, right? Mm-hmm. And so people don't always get that. Show what the win is going to be for them. For me, Jack, I was getting this incredible, extraordinary experience if I asked, but I had to ask the right way. Now, I never, at such a young age, came up with that myself. I worked so hard with the consulting firm that we were using to have them, what is successful or what has been successful in your pitch to executives so that I can get this over the goal line, because I personally had an interest to learn it.
Right.
And so if you can work and make sure that you're fine tuning then my communication, my pitch with the support of them, that's a win-win situation. It wasn't me doing it on my own.
Yeah. It's like if it were just you on your own, it would be a massive failure. You've got to, salesmanship is so critical in any leadership type of job.
And it's the way in which you communicate, which is not just, as I've said, it's not just I've done or me. It's very much, did I understand at that point in time the type of experience? Yeah, but I love change. If I was in finance and I was just doing, and not just because it works for many people, if I was doing a monthly close, I know I would get tired of that. And so I wanted the change. I loved the restructure. I loved the build of things and the impact that it could have. And that has been very consistent throughout my career.
And that's something I wanted to ask you about, because clearly, you're an innovator, a risk taker, however I want to phrase it. But also, fundamentally, you grew up in finance. You started at Anderson, as old school a CPA firm as there was at the time, and, various CFO roles. So you're still like a financial steward, right? So how can you advise these young people, and more CFOs are having the opportunity to be innovators, while not letting go of sort of what some might consider still a core responsibility in CFOs?
Yeah, great question. So those coming in new, I do think that one of the most valuable things that people don't do and they don't ask is to be in the room, right? And so if you are working on your monthly close, you do not get to understand from like the C-suite perspective at that point in time, how it's delivered, what the reactions are, what you should anticipate so that you can question it. If you can shadow your boss at those periods of time and understand that boardroom dynamic on what's important, what works and what doesn't work, then it gets you a step further. And so you also know what to aspire for, Jack, right? Me, I'm able to work with the CFOs, and I didn't know what a DSO calc was when I started days sales outstanding, which was so important for them to get paid. How many days outstanding are we that we haven't received our revenue? It was key to their metrics. But in those conversations, you learn so much more about how executives think so that you can actually start to get your own education to then fill their needs. Right. So I would say my first advice would be is just ask, can I shadow? Can I learn? Or if they say no, it's, private or it's a C-suite only, make sure that in your reviews or you have a weekly is asked. Can I ask how you delivered that and what the response was or what the tough questions are so that you learn?
Oh, yeah.
Most people want to help. It's just that you're busy at work that they don't always have the time. But put time on the calendar because that will expedite, one, your own interest. Is that the position that you want to be in? And then it's like what skills you need and what polishing you need to be able to enter there and expose yourself with success.
No, that's great. And, I commend you for doing that, because I talk to a lot of young professionals and, they're afraid to ask people to be a mentor or to ask people for advice. But, I've been doing this a little bit, and it's the rare person that, they might say no, but they're never angered by the request, or, and they might say no more because I don't think I'm an appropriate mentor for you for whatever reason. So
right. Most of the time it's time management that they either won't have the time, but most people, when you ask them, can I understand or can you help me with this? They're flattered. They want to, right? They want to share their knowledge and their expertise. And if not, they're probably not somebody that you would want on your team. Right. And you would want to be working with if they're not willing to be open to teach you, to nourish you so you could grow. That's a team.
No, it makes sense. And I'm one of those, classic imposter syndrome type of people. And, even at this point, I still have it a little bit. But when people ask me if I will be a mentor to them, I just, did you run out of every other person you could possibly add? Why me? There's so many better people. But, I think when I have taken it on, I've done a good job with people. So.
You have a wisdom and knowledge. It's like, don't have that discount. And I always say for all the years that I've worked, there's so many different use cases where you've had situations. And so if you are open to helping people, it's not about you, but what you can offer them. And so I come to you for advice, Jack.
Yeah. A lot of people do. I mean, it's ultimately the person's decision whether or not they want to accept it. But I'm very free with giving advice at this point. But one thing I wanted to ask with you, and you referenced it a little bit in your early sports career, but it strikes me that in gaming and football, you entered very male-dominated industries. And I'm curious, how you sort of built credibility amongst these circles. And, maybe you had a head start from your early teen years experience playing lacrosse.
Yeah, I didn't intentionally go for male-dominant environments. It just so happened that it did play out that way. But that there's two things, and I can tell you a bit more about my leadership model and style, Connect, Trust, Grow. It's what I call the CTG, and it has helped me achieve, personal and professionally, is really transform myself in my life, being very authentic, like what we're talking about, building trust on a team, and then quick wins to grow. And so if you think about it, if you don't connect with people, you're not going to build trust. If you can't build trust, then where's your vision, right? Where's the growth? And so it's a very simple model, but what I do is I distill and break it down to the values that I created, how I used it at Viacom, that blueprint of my own transformation. And then when I got to the league, it's like I used it there for a quick win, but to really do the transformation of the work. That being said, there's one key value that I always have and I firmly believe in. If you don't ask, you don't get. And so how did a CFO go to become then, a head senior vice president at the NFL to run an innovation platform? Jack, I asked for it.
Yeah.
And so, wow, did you? And I used my CTG model, meaning I had gone back to business school after when I had first started at the NFL. I was doing the apparel strategy. After doing that, the new portal for bidding, we grew the business 220%. We had $1 billion deal, my first $1 billion apparel portfolio deal I'd ever done. And we brought Nike and New Era on the field. And I was like, wow, what an opportunity. One, just from the exposure from the NFL and the power of that brand and how it resonates. But also like the amazing opportunities that the NFL could provide me, right? If I had flipped my experience there and put my purpose into it, meaning like, what was I really passionate about at that time? And I did a lot of work. First, I went back to business school because I had gotten into schools here in New York and the NFL had asked me to defer it for the apparel strategy. So I went to NYU and I was immersed in leadership studies, new perspectives, but listen to my career. It's not so like there was one teacher in Nat Lechner and wow, she would have these case studies on how to think outside the box, how to build teams, to really make that transformation happen. But it was like sci-fi stuff to me that it's like, wow, you can really it's like, where did that vision come? And how do you tap into that vision to create a strategic plan, which is what I always love to do. And so after business school, it just so happened that the NFL had a new talent mobility program. It could not have been a better time. And it was for VPs, vice president. And they wanted to stimulate the culture to think differently about what you could do. And fine tune different skill sets. So with a little bit of business school spirit and type A, I spent a lot of time on what I called the Langton roadmap. I built this Langton roadmap that was an integrated plan where it was one page. I put all my accomplishments, so what I had done, but how it impacted the business. So people don't do an internal resume, right, Jack? You think, okay, I'm going to do that externally, but what I was doing is my internal resume because people and positions change, especially in HR at that time. Here we have a new program. Well, I'm going to show you. So I had all my accomplishments. Middle column was manager feedback, my leadership skills, what they said about me and constructive criticisms. And then it was my blue sky. And in my blue sky, it was very clear I wanted transformational growth and leadership opportunity at a time when there was the league of denial with all the concussion crisis. I wanted to help because it was so personal to me. I wanted to help build out the league-wide youth strategy because what sports did to me in youth, because they were having issues with kids coming into sport in the pipeline at that point in time, but also help to build out the health and safety portfolio or the safety strategy for athletes. Why? Because in my second year of college, I not only blew out my knee at the Yale Bowl playing, so what was a career in my identity, I lost. And then it was a career-ending injury. And I also lost my mom to cancer. So with that double blow, here was an opportunity to say, okay, wow, I can really turn this into purpose. And if I could help to mitigate injuries that happened to me and that experience that I had to happen most elite, then it was my passion. And I connected my purpose and my passion to what the league needed at that point in time. Was somebody to come in with a strategy, somebody to come in and help to build out that vision. It was a team. It was not just solely me, but then they responded to my request. And in 2014, in a time that the NFL was being very scrutinized as the League of Denial and, the concussion movie with Will Smith was coming out, there was frontline episodes, Congress was holding hearing. I step into this new role and I was like, wow, I don't think I knew what I was really asking for, Jack. But I was passionate about it. And if you don't ask, you don't get. And my passion is what really helped me to not only be so stimulated there, but be more transformative, because I played into what my skills were, not what I didn't have, which is the science. I'm not a doctor. There's many things I'm not, but I know what I'm good at. And so I played into that. And then look, last year when I started at the league, it was all of that scrutiny. And last year, upon leaving, the league was down to the lowest number of concussions in history.
Wow, that's amazing.
And it went from League of Denial to what I call League of Solutions. Why? Because what we built, data and insights, like those other companies. The more data you have about the injury, the more we could give the data to the athlete management teams that work with the players to mitigate those injuries. And there's numerous different examples that I can go, but the better insights and insights that they hadn't had before, because what we could consolidate across 32 teams, 53-man rosters is different than what a team could do. And so with that power of the N and the insights that we were able to provide, they were more educated, and we made their job more efficient with providing them data so that they can real-time manage their players, which they just hadn't had before.
That's remarkable, because I remember, I think like most Americans, I'm a big football fan. Few things more enjoyable than watching people play football at a very high level. But, when you'd hear these stories about concussions 10, 12 years ago, whenever it was, and, you'd see these players getting injured, you'd be like, is the future, I actually remember thinking, is the future society going to look back upon us the way we look back at Romans feeding the Christians to the lions? I mean, is this going to be considered like really barbaric? And, thank God for you and your team for, the remarkable achievement that you did. Thinking about where we were, you did it in less than a decade. That was unthinkable probably 10 years ago.
Yeah. And that truly is the power of the NFL. When I say it was a meaningful experience, and I also, being in a male dom, I grew as a human, but I grew as a female. I really played into my strengths, which is that building those authentic connections with numerous different disciplines that had never worked before. And the expert ecosystems were just compounded of who we were bringing in excellence. But it was my ability to authentically connect. And I'm going to go back to a point that you just made about the transformation, to build that team. But then it was the quick wins and the continuous growth. But here's why they trusted me, is because of my passion associated with it. I once spoke to a school that was considering canceling their football program. And I had explained to them all that we had done at the NFL, and with every intent that it will trickle down, right, to not only football at college and the youth level, but through all sports. And I really do firmly believe that. I said to this board, I'm sitting here in front of you today. I would not be in my seat. I would not have been afforded the opportunities that I've had if I didn't play sport. I blew out my knee. I had a career-ending injury. Would I do it all again? Absolutely. So what I would encourage you to think about the values and what it's going to offer, not be in fear, right, of an injury. That's not a way to look or see, especially in the digital age right now.
Right. So.
Right? When people are so digitally connected, you need the human connection. You need those authentic connections. You need to learn how to build trust and accelerate a team and growth. And so that's why I think every single one of our teams that were so diverse with different experiences believed in me.
And that's leadership in a nutshell, pretty much. So I want to, it's a rare opportunity for me to interview you, because top of mind for CFOs right now is AI and analytics. And few people know how these can be as transformative as you do, given what you've done. So what advice can you give for CFOs to, embrace these technologies again with their natural, they're not innovative, and they also have concerns that other executives don't have around data privacy and cybersecurity generally that maybe some other members of the C-suite aren't thinking about?
Right. Great question. So, and this goes back to, Jack, many of the talks that I give, because as I said, whether it was being, and it's very authentic to me, but being the only girl on a boys team, here I'm in a space where we're starting this new department in health and safety. And we had numerous different quick wins with different partnerships, et cetera. We were manually counting, and I'm going to go to my advice in a second. We were manually counting the number of head impacts in a game.
Manually.
NFL technicians, it took 4 days.
I bet.
The number of head impacts. We do a double-blind review to make sure that it was consistent, statistically significant. That's 8 days. And I was like, wow, there's a better way to do this. Like all of the implementations that I'd done in the data insight was like, there is a better way to do this. Do you think I would have done that on my own? No. So data privacy says you have to build and connect first with the expert ecosystem. You will never have all the answers, and it is overwhelming. And so whether that is, a lot of times you'd have consulting firms, but bring together the areas of expertise and excellence. What I did at that point in time was we came up with, a vision. How do we quantify, right, our game, meaning the number of impacts on field, so that we didn't have to go through that very laborious approach of counting. We knew the data was so rich and was impacting. We were giving that to helmet manufacturers. It was creating for rules changes. The insights were so profound. However, you can't scale that way. And so we went on a roadshow where I had one of our chief engineers and numerous others where we pitched what our vision is to all big tech partners, to MIT, to, Columbia, that were on the forefront of new technologies in the space and knew from a commercial corporate perspective who was doing what. That is education. We were learning, right? And so understand what the market is, understand what the opportunities are. I will say that, yes, many people wanted to work with the NFL, but if you don't get out and learn and build that expert ecosystem that you need, no one CFO, I couldn't have done that on my own. And so build the right expert ecosystem that surrounds you so that either you can go and present and pitch that to a CEO or your CEO or your COO, right? But get the area of expertise and the knowledge that you don't have to play that forward. And you could have it internally, right? And then you have to make sure that then when you're presenting these big visions, there has to be quick wins. Like if I were to go in and say, okay, we want to predict injuries for NFL athletes, right? So we have to start. The start was, it takes us 4 days to count. Is there, and there is, a computer vision technique? Because we have all impacts in video. Is there a way that we can, by code, count and track a player and his impacts? There was. So here it was the vision was there is a technology that could be deployed then. And we ended up crowdsourcing those 2 algorithms. And now, ready for this, in seconds, near real time, the NFL has head impact back to 2015 because of 2 algorithms that were built. Now, sitting in your seat today, or me as a CFO, would I have had the vision to do all of that? No, it was getting out of your seat, getting the area of expertise. I always say, and this is what I do a lot in my consulting, is coach, who do you need to help to refine that idea or build that strategy? And what expert ecosystem do you need? Because it is, Jack, it's overwhelming. But once you have the confidence and once you do that due diligence, much easier to go in and to present for funding, right? And or for a new strategy and or for strategic partnership to get that done.
Makes sense. So that's all fascinating. And it led to what you're doing now, where you're advising a lot of organizations on growth and transformation. I'd love to learn a little bit about that. In particular, one of the things I noticed that you're doing is you're utilizing AI strategies to support human work, not to replace human work. And I think that's critical. Can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, and this is my experience. And I know that through years, AI over the course of the past, I'd say year and a half, has really been transformative out broadly to publicly, right? The AI application that we were building was closed environment. It was, longitudinal records, quantifying body movement so where we can predict injury. That is very different from what the world in the digital space and AI is offering. I wish that I had that when I was working. However, there are, and this is a very important principle, is that when you are building AI or you are building technologies to deploy, it has to be human-centered. And so go to that experience that I had offered at Viacom. If I didn't sit with those executives and compare and contrast, understand their concerns and their needs, they wouldn't have used the application. It's sunk. And so if you don't understand the human need of it, right? and you're not able to convey with confidence that they'll have more utility, then what are we doing? So it has to be human-centered. Another example of that is, we created this engineering roadmap, which was an investment in how to better understand counting the head impacts, but reviewing every concussion in video, annotated so many variables, and it was such rich data so that we could give that data to helmet manufacturers so that they could better design helmets for each position to withstand those type of severity and those type of locations and impact. Very different for different positions. And so one of the hardest things is to have, think about this, an elite NFL player who's grown, who is the top performer on his team, and you're going to tell him to change his helmet?
Probably not.
Change behaviors. And so in my experience, working with the equipment managers at each one of the clubs, if I didn't educate and inform them, because they were the conduit to teach the player, right? To educate the player and outfit the player, then we would not have been successful. So with all of the data and the richness of the data and new technologies, whether AI, helmet technologies, if you don't focus on the human-centered approach, then you're not going to have a successful deployment. It could fall flat, and that's the risk. So it's just, and the third example there is when we built this AI platform for the athletic management team. So you're talking about the sports scientists, the athletic trainers, the team physicians, etc. You're giving them information, insights they hadn't had before. They could then, because we integrated and aggregated Jack data across all 32 teams, all rosters, you can compare one running back's loads and exertions across all running backs. De-identified, they hadn't had that before. It gave them more insights to do their job more effectively. It made them smarter. We weren't replacing them. So when I say human-centered focus, AI is coming. It's here. And if you don't adopt and embody that it could evolve your role, it can make you more efficient and smarter, then you're going to be left behind. That's very similar to when we had the .com boom and you had all those local mom and pops that didn't want to go online. Well, I'm sure your sales are hurting. So climb on board. But and this is my experience, when we have built, and I say when we have built technologies, AI platforms, if you didn't work the end user and make it human-centered, then you risked the lack of adoption, the lack of use, and the lack of rollout. And so it's been my experience, and I think in today's day and age, it is so important for individuals and corporations to then get on board.
You're absolutely right. Now, it's interesting you were talking about the human thing, and I was thinking I'm old enough to remember when most hockey players didn't wear a helmet, and when the league mandated that they had to wear a helmet, they fought it. They actually, you wouldn't remember it. You're a few years too young, but they actually grandfathered you in if you were already playing and not using a helmet. You didn't have to. It was just the rookies, and anyone after that had to. And I remember Phil Esposito still playing into the mid 1970s with no helmet. He was the last one, as far as I know. So
I won't name names, but we had gotten to a place where we were able to, working with the NFLPA, so the NFL working with the Players Association, where we tested every helmet in laboratory to understand that helmet's performance. I'm overly simplifying. There were some helmets that were correlated to a higher risk of injury. Proven. We had the data and the science to support it. Yet the player wouldn't change out of that helmet. It's exactly what you're saying. And so you had the conviction with data, which is very important. That's that trust element. Behaviors are hard to change. We had to grandfather certain players in so that they would adopt and acclimate to a new helmet over the course of that year because they were very well-known players. They're all well-known.
Yeah.
But you have to then have an acclimation period. So the NFL went through that as well, and it was brilliantly handled.
No, that makes sense. So anyway, this has been a lot of fun, Jennifer, and I know you have a lot going on. So, thanks for making the time to do it. But I'd like to close. One thing I noticed from your website, that your mission is to inspire the next generation of innovation leaders. And it's just a coincidence, I think, that we used almost the exact same phrase, because our mission is to inspire the next generation of financial leaders. So I'd like to ask you maybe some closing words for those next generation of innovative financial leaders. And what should they be thinking about today?
Oh, I love it. And I appreciate I very much enjoyed the conversation and appreciate you, Jack. It's been fun. I think that some of my, and I've shared a lot, but some of my top, if you don't ask, you don't get. And so for many of those looking to climb into the C-suite CFO position that are climbing the finance ladder, ask to be in those boardrooms. Ask for the report out pre and post to really learn. When I did my career pivot, I asked for it, but I didn't make it all about me. I tied it to my own personal passion and purpose, but aligned to the league's organization. So think about, there are strategic ways to really transform for oneself, right? And for an organization, which are extremely important. I just recently had done, a talk that was for a healthcare organization. And this goes back to, I do have a website, Jennifer Langton Inc. And my speaking engagements and my consulting are so important. And I'm going to give you a concrete example why. I had gotten up and I was explaining to women the Langton roadmap and, how it was transformative, because many people ask Jack how I went from a CFO to running an innovation platform. And there were a few other, tidbits that I shared in the AI space going on the Technology Roadshow. There was a line of women, because it was women pioneering in healthcare. And there were 2 follow-up consulting jobs that I had done, which resonated so much and made that this is how I want to impact the future generations. There was one woman that started a mental health, really business and platform. And she wanted to better understand how she did her own roadmap to tie her own passion into it. And she had lost somebody of mental health, but that's nowhere in her pitch deck anywhere. So I coached her through really how to build out her own storyline that was purpose and passion. And it was so rewarding to me, and then another one was, how do we build out or think about an infrastructure for AI? Because people are overwhelmed. So that roadshow going out, it's like, yeah, I can bring you through the rigor that we went through on the things to think about. It's not just a cloud and cloud compute environment. You need people to build with subject matter expertise, right? And so that's the type of impact from years of working, and I still consider myself young, but from years of working, that's the type of impact that I really resonates and I really do care about. And that's influencing either the younger generations or sometimes it's the older, more wise, but they just need a new innovative learnings in today's day and age.
No, I think that's great. And yeah, I'm always reluctant to ask, advice for the next generation, because occasionally I do have guests who are like 38. Yeah, it's like, in fact, I have a niece, she was teaching robotics. She was like 17 and she was teaching robotics for like 13 and 14-year-old girls. She won a robotics contest. And she's like, she loves teaching the younger generation. You're 17. When I was your age, I worked at Burger King. I mean, what do you mean yeah, my God. Anyway, this has been a lot of fun. And, thank you again for your time. And I'd just like to give you the final word to wrap this up.
Well, one, thank you very much. I think that one of the greatest life lessons and opportunities that I've had was the value of sports and finance were my backbones to transform my career. And that's really what I want to do and play forward. So if there are any of your guests that are open for, a speaker that how to create that transformational impact and or consulting, please reach out directly to me. Everything is listed on my website again, Jennifer Langton Inc. But I want to impact the next future generations like you do, Jack.
Thank you for listening to this episode. To continue your exploration of this role that focuses on strategy, leadership, finance, and technology, listen to more episodes of the show at rockstarcfos.com. Join this revolution, episode by episode. Push yourself to achieve great things and unlock the best opportunities available to you. CFOs are creating a legacy, and it's time for you to leave your own unique imprint on the world today. That's all for now. See you on the next one.